Do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave them there when you come into this place. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome here. And do not leave your cares at the door. Oh, bring your pain and sorrow and joy. There's a place for them upon the altar of life. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome here. And do not leave your cares at the door. This is a place of grace, a place of losing and finding a way upon the winding road, meeting and parting, stumbling and starting over. Do not leave them there when you come into this place. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome in. Come in, and do not leave your cares at the door. Amen. Amen. Amen.
The UUCT care team follows up with congregants who are experiencing joys or sorrows. The care team also addresses needs of congregants. The care team can be contacted by email at careteam@uutampa.org. And now to our service.
Good morning and welcome. Before we begin our service, let us take a moment to share in our stone ritual. I place a stone for our joys. One for our sorrows. And one for our intentions for the coming week.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa. Whether you are a longtime member or a newcomer who's been browsing the web and you just happen to find us, welcome. We welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa. We're happy to have you with us. If you are overwhelmed, may you find relief. If you seek joy, may you find laughter. If you are lonely, may you find companionship. If you are hurting, may you find solace. No matter who you are or what path led you here, welcome to this community of spiritual journeyers. And now for our chalice lighting. To be of the earth is to know the restlessness of being a seed, the darkness of being planted, the struggle toward the light, the pain of growth into the light, the joy of bursting and bearing fruit, the love of being food for someone, the scattering of your seeds, the decay of the seasons, the mystery of death, and the miracle of birth.
Hello, everybody, again. Now we're singing number 21 in our great hymnal, For the Beauty of the Earth. of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of ear and eye, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the wonder of each hour, of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of human care, sister, brother, parent, child, for the kinship we all share, are the gentle thoughts and love. Source of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
Our sermon today is by the Reverend Dr. James McCumber, who grew up near Cleveland and has been a part of the Unitarian Universalist movement for more than 60 years. Ordained in 2001, Reverend Jim has served Unitarian Universalist congregations in Tennessee, New Mexico, New York, and Georgia. He and his dear wife moved to Palm Harbor in the summer of 2018.
I'd like to share an Aesop fable once again with you. This one, not so much in keeping with the theme of the service today, but in keeping with the theme of Christianity and the Golden Rule. So here we go. It's the fox and the stork. The fox one day thought of a plan to amuse himself at the expense of the stork, at whose odd appearance he was always laughing. "You must come and dine with me today," he said to the stork, smiling to himself at the trick he was about to play. The stork gladly accepted the invitation and arrived in good time and with a very good appetite. For dinner, the fox served soup, but it was set out in a very shallow dish, and all the stork could do was to wet the very tip of his bill. Not a drop of soup could he get to. But the fox lapped it up very easily, and to increase the disappointment of the stork, made a great show of enjoyment. The hungry stork was much displeased at the trick, but he was a calm, even-tempered fellow and saw no good in flying into a rage. Instead, not long afterward, he invited the fox to dine with him in turn. The fox arrived promptly at the time they had set, and the stork served a fish dinner. It had a very appetizing smell, but it was served in a tall jar with a very narrow neck. The stork could easily get at the food with his long bill, but all the fox could do was to lick the outside of the jar and sniff at the delicious odor. And when the fox lost his temper, The stork said calmly, "Do not play tricks on your neighbors unless you can stand the same treatment yourself." And so ends the story.
Hi, I'm Mindy Murphy, CEO of the Spring at Tampa Bay. I so enjoyed my time with you in 2019 and have been looking forward to seeing you in 2020. Unfortunately, the pandemic has interrupted our lives in so many heartbreaking ways. Since we can't be together, I hope this 2-minute overview of our programs for survivors of domestic violence will help you know what resources are available if you or anyone you know needs our life-saving and life-changing help. For almost 45 years, and even throughout the pandemic, the Spring of Tampa Bay has been open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether a survivor wants to make a crisis phone call or needs to flee to the safety of our shelter. We've also offered services outside of shelter, like support groups, linkage to community resources, advocacy, and safety planning at 2 weekday outreach locations in Tampa and Plant City. For over 20 years, we provided transitional housing at our Peace Village apartment complex, where at any given time, 12 moms and their kids will live on-site for up to 18 months as they rebuild their lives. And since 2017, we've built a top-notch legal program for survivors seeking an injunction for protection, employing 8 attorneys who provide free legal representation to survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Last year, we sheltered 509 adults and 477 kids, answered 7,089 crisis calls, provided safety services to 1,285 survivors outside of shelter, and provided legal advice and representation to 1,206 survivors. When wonderful folks like members of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa make cash gifts to support our work, you do so much good. For example, $25 can provide a gas card or Uber ride to get to and from an outreach appointment, injunction hearing, or medical appointment. $137 can enable an advocate to spend 8 hours answering our 24/7 crisis hotline. And $357 can underwrite a day in the life of our 3-person kids team, who lead out-of-school activities and meet individually with kids and moms to connect youngsters to services and supports. We are so grateful to each of you for caring about survivors of domestic violence and supporting our mission to end domestic violence and keep survivors safe. In closing, if you or someone you love is a victim or survivor of domestic violence, we want you to know you are not alone. Help is only a phone call away at 813-24/7-SAFE. Thank you.
To support the UUCT with your generous financial gifts, please go to the UUCT website and click on the Click Here link to donate. It will take you to our donation page, and you can securely make your donation to the church. Thank you.
This is called Easter Meditation, written by Susan McGinn, who's a Unitarian Universalist chaplain in the U.S. Navy. Let us do the unthinkable thing. We'll sit and breathe together on the edge of our seats in a world that pollinates and reproduces, shape-shifting and breaking into bloom. Let us sit and breathe together as one breath. Sit still just long enough for each of our dreams to rise and silently hover above us. Dreams mingling like old transcendent friends, floating finally free and light. Each of our dreams, stripping away fear like unnecessary winter layers that obey gravity all the way to the ground, far too heavy for the likes of us. We, the living, on Easter Sunday.
Please join in singing number 396, I Know This Rose Will Open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
Well, here we are, Easter Sunday once again. It's one of those Sundays where many of us as Unitarian Universalists don't quite know what to do. Attendance in our churches tends to be higher than on most other Sundays, just as it is in most traditional Christian churches. It's noteworthy that at roughly the same time of the year, synagogues draw larger than normal crowds because Jews are celebrating Passover. I don't know if these bumps carry over to video services or not. The word Easter actually derives from the German or Scandinavian goddess of the spring renewal named Ostara. Easter means for pagans the spring equinox, the time of year when new life began to emerge from the old. Nature resurrected herself, and so the pagan Easter celebration and the early Christian celebration of Jesus' resurrection complemented one another. Other familiar modern symbols came out of that tradition too. One such symbol we now call the Easter Bunny. Some say he originated as a large, handsome bird that belonged to Ostara. She changed him from a bird to a rabbit, more closely associated with fertility, I suppose, which may explain the rabbit's preoccupation with nest-like baskets filled with eggs. Sometime later, the Easter Bunny was further transformed into chocolate, which everybody knows is the true symbol of spring renewal. Jesus of Nazareth was executed at Passover. The Bible stories tell us about that time. Yet Easter, as we know it today, did not come into being 3 days after Jesus' death. It's pretty safe to assume that Mary Magdalene was not out hunting for eggs and chocolate rabbits when she discovered that Jesus' tomb was empty. Indeed, centuries passed after Jesus' execution before the church formulated the Christian doctrine of Easter. Understanding something about how that doctrine evolved can help us to understand why Easter is special, even now, for many Unitarian Universalists who don't accept Jesus' resurrection as historic, literal fact. What is special about it? Perhaps the same thing that Passover is about, and that has to do with the meaning of freedom. After all, how did the Exodus, the escape of the Jewish people from bondage in Egypt, actually take place? What is the meaning of Passover? And we, as Unitarian Universalists, ask on this Sunday, how did Jesus really die? What do these holidays that are celebrated by two of our most important Unitarian Universalist religious sources mean? Why are they important to us thousands of years after they occurred? Historians have not reached anything like a conclusion to answering these questions. The term Passover comes from the myth of the last of the great plagues God was supposed to have visited upon the Egyptians who had held the Hebrew people in bondage for many, many generations. Hebrews marked their houses with the blood of sacrificial animals to ward off angels who would otherwise be killing the firstborn in each and every house in Egypt. The angels would pass over Hebrew families. It seems likely to many historians that the escape from Egypt of Jews and Jewish families took place actually over many years, not all at once. Their patriarchal leader, Moses, was probably a synthesis of many historical figures assembled over many generations. And would it have happened in the spring of the year? There's no reason to suppose so. But the mythical power of springtime and rebirth is compelling, is it not? Do these people who fled Egypt become instantly free? That we may perceive freedom as the absence of slavery. However, an absence of slavery is a necessary but not sufficient condition for freedom. Rabbi Aden Ibn Yisrael explains, slavery is a condition wherein one is forever forced to act according to the will of another. Freedom is the ability of a human to act and express selfhood. Ibn Yisrael asserts that at first, the Jewish people were merely runaway slaves. When a person's spirit has been broken or never allowed to develop, that person cannot be considered to be free. He or she is merely an abandoned slave. The customary Passover Seder carries an overriding theme of freedom. But freedom permeates our human essence only over time. The process of redemption of the Jewish people, their deliverance from the Egyptian oppressors, ultimately to become free, is what Passover is about. The mythical process of becoming free required that they wander for a long time, seemingly without direction. Why 40 years? So that when they learned to be free, there would be no former slaves among them. The miracle of the Exodus was not just the escape itself, it was the slow metamorphosis into becoming a free people that was miraculous. Only after the generation born in slavery had passed on were the Hebrew people able to enter the land of Israel and build a free society. Real redemption, deliverance from oppression, involves more than escaping from slavery. It requires the experience of maturing into self-determination as a way of life. A millennium or more would pass after the Exodus, before Jesus came on the scene in Israel. He became a revolutionary prophet in the face of new oppressions. These new phenomena included the brutal governance of the Romans, as well as the domestication of the Jewish faith. By this, I mean the use of faith traditions, including the celebration of Passover, to control the behavior of the Jewish people. The faith, in the form of very restrictive purity laws, became a useful tool for population control. Jesus saw these two major cooperative phenomena as having disastrous effects on Jewish society. His revolutionary message became one of compassion. Purity be damned. This attitude is probably what led to his execution. He may very well have caused a ruckus in the temple in Jerusalem at Passover. At that time, a Roman fortification, a guard tower, in fact, closely overlooked the temple. What is most likely is that a Roman centurion, a sergeant, witnessed the ruckus and ordered Jesus to be summarily executed. No trial before Pilate, no demands from the Sanhedrin, no mob scene, just an ignominious, brutal death as an example to other potential troublemakers. This scenario seems far more likely than the involved story told in the Bible. Jesus' small band of followers would have been in shock, hoping somehow that their teacher, their rabbi, had not merely been murdered. Slowly, over the course of many generations, the doctrine of the resurrection would take shape, and the holiday would come to be called, ironically, Easter, in honor of the pagan goddess Ostara. As the early Christian movement took hold, the doctrine that Jesus' death was redemption, deliverance from original sin, developed. It was reported and supported by the miraculous, quite mythical resurrection. that this resurrection was real, not allegorical, eventually came to be the dogma of the early church. It is certainly a wedge issue for many of us as Unitarian Universalists. For many religious liberals, the distinction used by biblical scholar Marcus Borg is most helpful. There is the largely credible pre-Easter Jesus and the far less credible post-Easter Jesus. For many of us, an exasperating aspect of some contemporary Christian practice is the focus only on the post-Easter resurrected Jesus, the religion about Jesus, while ignoring the pre-Easter social justice ministry of hope and freedom that he advocated, the religion of Jesus. A modern rabbi named Micah Greenstein writes about the Easter season. He says that the important part of Easter is this season's underlying message of renewal. This season is meant to remind Christians and anyone else who will listen, that's where we UUs come in, that it is never too late to start over again. It's never too late to turn things around. I would add that the message is about freedom, the freedom to change, to experience redemption, deliverance, and to set a new course for our lives. Rabbi Greenstein tells a story about the Reverend Emmanuel Cleaver when he was actually His Honor Mayor Cleaver of Kansas City, Missouri. Mayor Cleaver and his wife had flown to San Francisco and were headed to the home of friends in a rented car. Mayor Cleaver, like some men, had a propensity to brag about his sense of direction. It is in the genes of men to be right when we are driving, he said. Now, their destination was Daly City, only a scant 15 minutes out of San Francisco. After about 30 minutes, and a sign which read San Jose, 30 miles, Ms. Cleaver offered tentatively, "Honey, I think we're on the wrong freeway." His Honor replied, "No, we are not. I know where I'm going." Mrs. Cleaver began to bite her lip as she suffered in silence. Mr. Cleaver knew he was wrong, but he could not overcome his pride and admit it. So he kept driving. Suddenly, he saw it. The most beautiful, transformational sign he had seen in years. In big, bold letters, it read, "U-turns permitted." Rabbi Greenstein asserts that one of the axioms, the bedrock principles of both Judaism and Christianity, is that God permits U-turns. No matter how far we have traveled down a particular road of life, be it personal, professional, religious, or simply ill-fated, we are free to make a U-turn, to steer in a better direction. We can let that old path die off and turn around toward a direction of rebirth. Perhaps even go back to the social justice issues that Jesus of Nazareth believed were so important. There's another way to experience Easter metaphorically. This idea comes from Renita Weems, whose religious roots are in the African American evangelical movement. She was, by the way, my Hebrew Bible or Old Testament professor at the Vanderbilt Divinity School. Professor Weems wrote, "Everything you need to know about life, about the mysteries of life, about the secret to life, can be learned in a garden if you pay attention." And many of us rely on weather.com, on our tablets or phones or our TV sets to tell us what's going on in the environment. Rain, sunshine, thunderstorms. We proceed from one activity to the next, oblivious to our environment, oblivious to the turning of the seasons. She goes on. We cannot experience the Easter tide of resurrection and renewal until we first go through a period of disequilibrium, of dying, of shedding, of letting go of winter. You cannot experience spring until you have first experienced winter. In other words, we must wander the desert for a time. It may be obvious, but rebirth presupposes an experience of death, just as in any garden. In many churches this morning, you'd hear these words, "He is risen." Yet what may be more important at Easter are these words from Matthew chapter 28. He is not here. He transcends the tomb. And the where is not important. But while we're at it, what does here mean? Here-ness is a symbol for physical limitations and emotional fetters. He is not here. Thus becomes a proclamation of death reborn into life, redemption transforming into a life of ultimate spiritual freedom. You see, it's all about the freedom of the human spirit. That's where Passover and the first Easter come from. Resurrection indeed. Please permit me one more resurrection story. It's an unfinished story, as are most stories involving human experience. It's about you. It's about the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa. Some years ago, the congregation fell on hard times. Things got out of kilter. Disagreements arose. The covenantal relationships that had been operative began to fray, to break down. People began to question one another, to point fingers, and even, I suspect, to choose up sides. People's ability to express selfhood suffered. Then, as darkness seemed to permeate the landscape, the long COVID winter set in. You're not able to look directly into one another's eyes, to work on an exodus from the plague that beset the church. I feel like, in a way, I have joined you as we are wandering the desert as a disjointed band of people seeking who knows what. But you know, I see a sign up ahead. It reads, U-turns are permitted. Leaders in this congregation have been saying, yes, we can change direction. And many of us want to do so. We are tired of wandering the desert, and the pandemic threat seems to be subsiding at last. There could be the promise of freedom, of selfhood in our future. But freedom requires hard work, and there is no shortage of work to be done. Congregations and large ships do not turn on a dime. The broad challenge, as I see it, is to build back better. I know, that line belongs to some politician, but it fits. This church needs to make a bold turn, and there are people who are endeavoring to make that happen. Is the promised land right around the corner? No, it's not. But in a covenantal sense, I would assert that it is indeed out there. We have been experiencing the disequilibrium of dying, of shedding, of letting go, of winter. This church can find its way and build back better. May it be so. Amen. And have a good Easter Sunday.
And now to extinguish our chalice. Go Boldly by Jean M. Olson. May you be brave enough to expose your aching woundedness and reveal your vulnerability. May you speak your deepest truths, knowing that they will change as you do. May you sing the music within you, composing your own melody, playing your song with all your heart. May you draw, paint, sculpt, and sew, showing the world your vision. May you write letters, poetry, biography, slogans, graffiti, the great novel, laying bare your words to love and hate. May you love even though your heart breaks again and again. And until the end of your days, may your life be filled with possibilities and courage.
Please join in singing number 61, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again. Lo, the earth awakes again, Alleluia, from the winter's bond and pain, Alleluia, bring
tropical garden of blissful ignorance, secure in a preordained destiny, and certain of God-guaranteed laws, we would rather choose the fruit and burden of knowing and yearning, of choice and consequence, of good and evil, though we must forever lose the garden. We would be free to choose, though we must be the slaves and victims of our choice. We would know love and not just affection, the intensity of joy and not mere pleasure alone. We would know the depths of confusion and sorrow as the price for heights of insight and joy, rather than have an immunity which would make us insensitive to either. We would know the thrill of discovery and achievement, though we must hazard the pain of loss and failure. Therefore, when we might accept the mediocre and risk only pathos, we would rather seek the divine and risk tragedy. We worship truth, love, beauty, justice, not for the promise of an eternal reward, nor with the expectation of an earthly success, but because we have faith in their worth and in their power to give meaning and dignity to human life. Whether we are an accident of nature or the design of a God, it is we who must give dignity to our lives if we are to be worthy of the design or build upon the accident. Thanks to Nicholas C. Cardell, Jr., longtime Unitarian Universalist minister.